So we're recording
Thank you,
and
Caitlin.
live.
Thank you, Caitlin. Good evening, everyone. We'll allow just a minute or two for folks to join the Zoom call, and then we'll officially call the July 14th meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission to order. Sorry about my somewhat gravelly voice tonight. Hopefully I won't have to do too much speaking. Okay. Let's see, any sign of... Okay, I think it looks like I see Malcolm in the attendees now, Caitlin. Okay, I'm going... What's that?
Thank you, I do as well. I'll get him over.
Okay, well, let's call the meeting to order. Bastille Day, le 14 juillet, 14th of July, 2022, and my wedding anniversary. This is tonight's meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission. We'll officially call it to order, and we'll start with our usual roll call. I believe that chuckle was from Mr. Bernhardt. Is that correct?
I'm here.
Okay. Joe Morgan?
I'm here.
Yep. Okay. Mark Syndrome?
Present.
Okay. Christopher Fay?
Here.
Okay. And I think we're getting Malcolm Conworth on board. Are you with us, Malcolm? Let's see. That's okay, Malcolm. I see Malcolm in the attendee list. So check your audio and see if you can get that going. In the meantime, we also have Caitlin Sullivan, planner, and Andy Port, planning director of City of Newburyport, and our note taker, Gretchen Joy, for whom we are grateful. There may be a public comment period tonight, so I'll recite or remind you of the rules for that. Ordinarily, just the members of the board and applicants will have audio enabled, but if there is a public comment period and you wish to speak, please use the Zoom controls to raise your hand so we know that you wish to speak, and we'll recognize you. We'll also unmute you on our end, but you will also have to unmute yourself on your end using the controls, in the Zoom application. If you're using a computer or a tablet or whatever. If you're on the phone, by any chance, it's *9 to raise or lower hand and *6 to mute and unmute. Okay, so Malcolm, have we got your audio straightened out?
I think so.
Oh yeah, I heard you. Good, very good. All right, so we're all present and accounted for. The first order of business is a DOD advisory review. This is a downtown overlay district within which 24 Merrimack Street falls. I believe in this case, the applicant is the city itself. So Mr. Port is going to talk to us about that. I'm assuming you have some sort of a presentation, Andy?
Yes, I have a couple of slides. I'll switch back and forth between a couple of things. And I wanted to note, if I could, Maren Braco and Dan Dwyer, who are here from Sasaki, our design team, to assist with that overview as well.
Oh, excellent. And I'll just, maybe you already covered this in your presentation, but just in case anyone on this board was wondering, this is new construction. But the new construction within the downtown overlay district has to conform to certain things. In this case, our main concern will be that the quote, that the structure will not impair the integrity or character of the district or adjoining districts, nor be detrimental to the health or welfare. And there's more than that. All right, Andy, why don't I let you take it away?
Sure, thank you. Let me just, and I apologize, I'm just going to take control of the screen here. This particular project, like the chair said, this is, I have wearing double hats here, right? So I'm involved in the permitting review process, but I'm also acting as project manager for this particular project. This is Market Landing Park. It's just an illustration that I'm showing you right now, provided by Sasaki a little bit earlier. And I'll hand over to him in a second. I just want to make sure that Maren and Dan have been able to introduce themselves. Maren and Dan, do you just want to say hello to the folks here?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dan Dwyer. I'm an architect at Sasaki.
Maren Breka, I'm a senior associate landscape architect and the project manager at Sasaki.
Great, thanks. And they're welcome to jump in here at any point. Just briefly, as for context, I just pull up this illustration. I sometimes find three-dimensional renderings to be a little bit more useful for some context. But I just wanted to note here, this is just an illustration of, and I'm going to bring up an annotation tool here. But this is an illustration that Sasaki provided just to give an idea of three-dimensionally of where the park expansion will be. I think we're all pretty familiar with the central waterfront. So what you'll note is in a couple of these illustrations is that, we have today the central boardwalk and we have Market Landing Park as we all think of it right in the center. And what we're working on in this project is to expand the flanking wings of this park. And then there's some other components of that, like a new visitor center restroom facility to replace the trailers we've got at Merrimack Street. So that's kind of the overall context for this project. What we are doing is essentially reducing the remaining parking areas at the edges here. And again, we're looking from the riverside, of course, here. I'm very often looking at the waterfront on a plan view from Market Square, so we'll take that orientation in a moment. But this is the overall area for the project. And I just wanted to make sure you're all familiar with that. The scope of your review, generally speaking, although we have this entire project here that is going to the planning board for review for site plan approval, the context for the NHC's review is really this building here. And as the chair mentioned, even though the downtown overlay district that we have is essentially the best tool we have right now to ensure that architectural work in the downtown is appropriate in light of the fact that we don't have a historic district, at least right yet, for the downtown. So that zoning review and the planning board's oversight, in addition to the other reviews that they do downtown, ensures that new architecture as well is also reasonably compatible with the downtown. So the question here for the historical commission to give advisory opinions to the planning board is whether or not that relatively new structure that we're placing in there up by Merrimack Street to replace the trailers is reasonably appropriate in context with the downtown. Well, not shown on this, and you may recall there's a harbor master facility just off the screen here that was recently constructed of a sort of a clapboard siding style, not a brick style, structure, for instance, but a relatively new structure that we built. We don't often see new structures downtown, but this would be one of those. I would also note that we're doing this project in phases, so we're not exactly sure when this new visitor center building facility will be built, but that is part of the context. Is it may not be in year one of the project. Year one, we're hopeful in spring of next year, based on the current tracking, to be doing the park improvements here, widening that park, and it's possible that the parking areas here and the visitor center will be a second and third phase, just based on available funding. So we're happy to answer any questions as we go along, but I just wanted to make sure you had adequate context for the overall project. I'm gonna, and then feel free to jump in here, of course, both Dan and Maren and members of the commission. I'm just gonna switch here to an aerial photo that's actually looking top down from the orientation I think most of us are familiar with more often, which is looking at, Market Square is down here at the bottom. And let me just switch tools here, maybe. Switch tools. So if you can see my hand there, can you all, Glenn, can you all see my hand?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So down here at Market Square, obviously, that's typically how we orient this map as we've been looking at the park project. We look at it in this angle. So some of the other renderings you'll kind of see compared to this. So this is just an aerial photograph that we had. This is an excerpt from a presentation we had given to the Community Preservation Committee. The City Council has been heavily involved in the review of this project, as have other stakeholders. So there's a fair amount of work that's gone into the design of the project thus far. What you're seeing here is just an aerial photograph that was taken after we had done what we're calling interim park improvements or lawn space in about 2019. We did that when we knew that the NRA was being dissolved. We knew that there was the full intention of the city to expand the park. And we wanted to make sure that people, one, got used to that, and two, could start to take advantage of some of those spaces for overflow. Oddly, the pandemic was happening, it started up at that time. And so we didn't necessarily see huge gatherings of folks using these interim lawn spaces. But the idea was that, at least in the interim, that if there were large events, that folks could continue to spill onto that future expansion of park space. So what you've seen to date has been just, temporary, very superficial lawn spaces expanded there, setting the stage for the park wings that will come out from there. So this is just an aerial photograph of the existing site. And so obviously we're reducing the east and west parking lots. And the area that you're looking at primarily is over in this corner here by Merrimack Street, where we're taking away the trailers that we've all been used to there, this quote unquote temporary trailers that have all been, for the most part, almost permanent. We're taking those away. We'll be replacing with a permanent structure. There may be some temporary facilities placed in there in the interim, during the construction phase. But in essence, we'll get a permanent facility up there by the street. And Dan's been working on that architectural aspect of it. Maren has been project manager for Sasaki, and with the rest of the team, working on a lot of the different site components. And I'm happy to elaborate on the rest of that as well. This is just a schematic, a rendering of the park improvements themselves. This is being refined as we go along, and it's a iterative process. We continue to take feedback from the city council in particular and others as we go along. And so one area in particular that we've continued to refine some work on is up here by the visitor center itself and the restrooms building that you'll be looking at. So the plaza that you're seeing there that goes with that is being refined right now. And what you'll see is that the building is actually being shifted from this rendering you're looking at right now. We'll shift a little bit further east, closer to where the current trailer structures are. I'm happy to go over more background with this, but there was a little bit of back and forth with this council over what was the preferred location for that structure. Originally, Sasaki had it located here next to, by the way, you all, I think, you're pretty well familiar with the so-called pedestrian ways to the waterfront. And so what we have worked out with the city council, with the Waterfront Trust is, in order to create a new pedestrian way here, we've agreed that we would name this Central Wharf Way. And in order to prevent confusion, because that's actually relocating the name here, Central Wharf Way here will be relocated as a name here. And this will become Upper and Lower Railroad Ave. We're sort of harking back to some earlier names of ways, and wharves on the waterfront. And the general consensus was to do this adjusted naming. So when you think of Central Wharf Way here, now think of it going forward as being here. And for that reason, we are not putting the building right where the trailers are, because that would be in conflict with the pedestrian path. We were placing it right next door. And during the last couple of weeks or months, we've received additional feedback from the city council, where they first wanted us to move it west a little bit, as you see here, closer to Summerby's Way and the pedestrian path that exists there today. They've asked us since then to move it, shift it back again east. And that's partly due to, as we were trying to address sea level rise and flood zones, to bring it out of the flood zone, bring it out of projected sea level rise further, and to try to reduce construction costs because of additional fill that would be needed to accommodate that building location. So all those things being combined, Sasaki continues to refine the plans in that area, but primarily, and we'll pull up some renderings of that they've got as progress drawings for that. But in essence, think of yourselves as reviewing this particular structure, which is just shifting a little bit further east here, but in that same plaza up by Merrimack Street. So some of you are familiar with the so-called pop-up park that's there with the seashells and little tents over the benches. That would be essentially that location there where the visitor booth and the trailers that would be removed, and we would replace it with these amenities, possibly as a third phase of the project, depending on all the contingent upon the funding coming in. As soon as we get that funding, we're obviously happy to proceed with that portion of the project, but we do not have funds for it right now. This is just an illustration. I'm not going to go into this in great detail. Sasaki is still refining it, but this was just meant to, on a black and white rendering, to show how the building will be sited with a plaza, a more refined, paved plaza out by Merrimack Street in lieu of the seashells that we have today in the final condition. And you can see here the pedestrian way, the temporary trailer structure for restroom facilities, and the visitor booth will be removed, and the new pedestrian pathway would be placed in here. And that's the primary reason why we can't put it right there. But as I had mentioned, the city council has most recently asked us to move it here back a little bit. And so forgive my orientation, but it'll be oriented same as here. And we will be making that shift. So unfortunately, we don't have the details for you on that, because it's really just been a very recent development in that aspect of the plans. But the architecture itself is not changing substantially. So that is what we're here to review with you. And I just wanted to make sure you had the overall context as you're considering the architecture itself.
Okay. Hey, quick question, Andy. Sure. It's a bit of a digression, but so just be real brief. Those public ways, is my memory correct that those are very old, historic, kind of legal rights of way, but to the river that the city is committed to maintain, or something like that? Is that the story?
Yeah, that's correct. I guess the one distinction I would make is, and let me just, if I can pan back to this earlier rendering, there is a legal requirement, technically speaking, if you go back to sort of the Bill Harris discussions we've had with the settlers over the years. Ferry Wharf Way has a true legal requirement to finish that way and bring it out here, essentially as we're showing here. There isn't a direct legal requirement for the completion or creation of this pedestrian way, but it obviously makes a lot of sense in terms of pedestrian connectivity, the distance between the ways, and there has been over the years, although it's not a legal requirement per se, there's been an expectation that we have a extension of what we used to refer to as Unicorn Street over here, a way across the street that would, as you point out, reflect some of the historic pedestrian connections or ways that we're reaching the wharves historically. So to your point, even though it's maybe not technically a legal requirement, it's consistent with the expectation that we finish Ferry Wharf Way. And so we're creating that pedestrian path here.
Thanks.
Sure. I'm going to shift now just to the some architectural rendering. So keep in mind, there are some contextual images that Sasaki had put together just to kind of show the type of architecture we have downtown. Not shown on this, obviously, is the Harbor Master facility, which is obviously not a brick structure, but a clapboard siding structure. And the City Council, I should clarify here, has requested that we not do a brick structure, actually, but rather that we do sort of a wood, clapboard style structure of some type. So with that, that's the basis by which Sasaki has refined their drawings and the renderings and their development of the plans here from a brick type structure, maybe with brick and glass and granite, to something that's a little bit more of a wood exterior.
All right. Did they give any reason why, Andy, the council?
I don't know if I can say, and I certainly would open up to Maren and Dan if they want to speak this a little further. I don't know if it's 100% clear there's a specific reason other than maybe sort of a preference, if you will. Some felt that was more preferable, and some felt, for instance, that you're talking with Rich Jones, the city clerk, and I might have felt that, say, a brick structure might have been more consistent with Market Square. But at the end of the day, it's a relatively small structure we're proposing. It's a sort of a site amenity, if you will. And I think that they maybe felt that it was a little bit more consistent with distinguishing it as a new structure versus old, and recognizing its relatively small structure, perhaps treating it more like the Harbor Master facility, which has a wood exterior or a clapboard exterior.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So let me just shift to the architectural plans, and I'm just going to show you real quick what the interior looks like a little bit, so you have an idea of what we're working with. This is just a floor plan of the building and a roof plan. So on the left side, you'll see the roof. Generally speaking, there is we're trying to create solar on the roof. We're trying to make a quote net zero building as far as energy use. So we're trying to, and this is consistent with a city council policy that was adopted. So we're trying to make sure that this building is basically covering its own electrical use. So that's why on the roof we'll have some solar, but it's being recessed behind a sort of a parapet wall. There's an overhang here that you'll see on the rendering in a moment, and that's located here on the floor plan. I'm just going to zoom in on that floor plan a little bit for you, just so you understand what we're trying to do in that space. We're creating a new visitor booth at the front. So this would be facing Merrimack Street in the plans that you've been seeing and what you'll see in a moment. That's a relatively small visitor booth. It's really to replace what's there today, make it more permanent and more inviting. There'll be glass windows, as you can see here along the outside edge. You'll see in a moment in the elevations and renderings. There's a mechanical space behind that. So this will be staffed, by the way, by city officials, chamber officials, and others that will be working with more of a active plan for staffing of that during season, and potentially with an extended season at the visitor booth in comparison to what we have provided off and on over the years to that booth that's there today. The mechanical closet is behind that. And then to the rear, and this maybe deserves some explanation, we originally, Sasaki and the city officials were looking at a consolidated sort of male-female restroom setup. There was some discussion earlier this year about consolidating that and looking at a alternative layout. We have come back to a discussion with the city council more recently where they made it very clear that they wanted us to do individual restrooms as stalls. So there's sort of a option, whether you're male or female or any preference you have for privacy, you're able to use any one of these individual restrooms. The ones with the circles are fully handicap accessible with for wheelchairs. But basically, these are all exterior doors, with a little bit of overhang there, all exterior doors. And while that might not typically, be the thing you sort of think of, you might think of one entrance, a vestibule of some type, and then just your standard lumped together restrooms with stalls and a common sink area. The city council had preferred, and this is where this plan comes from, is the preference for having individual stalls so that during the heavy usage, we're able to have any, number of folks rotating through these rooms and sort of get as much bandwidth through as possible when there's a heavy usage. So that is the reason why we have facing the two sides, east and west on the park, of a number of doors. However, Sasaki has obviously been working to minimize the appearance of that to extent, as an architectural feature. We don't necessarily want to highlight the series of doors. So we've recessed that a little bit. It's got an overhang, for some cover, and there's a plaza and landscaping around that area. But the orientation of the building is important because it was a preference for minimizing the width of the building as perceived from Merrimack Street. So that's why you'll see there's a very short facade with the visitor booth, very similar to what we have today. And the length of the building is going perpendicular to the street and to the river, so that when you're on either side, you're not seeing much of the building itself. And we did have some debate about pros and cons behind all that, which I'm happy to elaborate on. But in essence, this layout has been largely dictated by the discussions we've had with the council and their preferences for orientation and some design aspects. Dan and Mary, did you want to add anything in there before I go to the renderings?
No, I think you covered it quite well.
Okay, thanks. Let me just see here. I'm going to switch to the elevations here. So again, these are just two-dimensional renderings. There's a couple of illustrations we have that are being updated by Sasaki in a moment, but this is just to give you an idea. Forgive me because I'm using my my Adobe tools that are a little bit blocked by the Zoom tools at the moment. So 1 second. Yeah, so this is the whole drawing sheet, and again, this is a progress drawing, so we'll have a little bit more detail. Each week we have progress drawings that are getting more refined and more perfected, so to speak, with the inputs we get. So obviously we're looking for your feedback on the building so that the planning board can take that into account, and whatever ends up getting approved at the end of the day is both consistent with the direction we've been given from the council, but also acceptable to the historical commission and planning board in their review in the context of the architecture downtown. So this is elevations of the building. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on that. You can see some of the material selection we're talking about here: the cedar board, teak storefront, granite base. I'm going to pan around here just a little bit. This is a south elevation, so this would be facing Merrimack Street. You can see the sort of storefront view, glass door entrance, and an overhang canopy that will be there. We might have some signage on there that essentially says visitor center or public restrooms. We haven't determined the exact text, for that yet. That would be placed in that sort of proximate location. This is just the back side, the north elevation, which will be facing a parking lot. We haven't worked out that area definitively yet, but it's a relatively short facade. The other two facades, and I'm just going to zoom out from this a little bit. These are the other two facades, so east and west of that space. And again, this will be somewhat screened by tree plantings, vegetation, and a brick plaza and some seating, to sort of activate and make that area pretty vibrant. And so you'll see that there are doors that have the wood paneling to sort of blend with that appearance with the facade. There's a parapet wall up here that is blocking some of the solar panels that are up here. We have to work with our orientation as best we can, given that this building is perpendicular to Merrimack Street, work with that orientation. And so we'll have a series of panels up there to try to get as much solar as possible, while not necessarily emphasizing their appearance from the streetscape. And then, sort of enlarged glass windows where the storefront is itself. Then we have a three-dimensional view. I'm just going to go to a very simple one here of the building, where you can get an idea of what that building looks like, with the visitor booth at the front, the solar panels on the roof behind the parapet, a little overhang, and then the restroom doors here. We are still working on some of the landscape improvements and plaza improvements around the building, and that's based on very recent direction from the council, where we now have to work out a little bit changes to grading and accessible ramps and staircases and whatnot. With that, I'm going to shift now to a couple of illustrations that we have more recently from Sasaki, that again are in progress, but do illustrate, and bear with me for just a moment, do show what this might look like from Merrimack Street. Now, keep in mind that these illustrations here do not show the final location of the building footprint. This rendering was done right before we got the feedback from the city council to move this building a little bit further over. So what you're looking at right now is from Merrimack Street. This is looking west. So Browns Wharf, the Browns Wharf building would be, sorry, let me just make sure you can see my hand here. Browns Wharf and Browns Wharf building, waterfront west area would be back here. City Hall is, is off the screen over here. So the Route 1 area is down that way. Market Landing Park, as we think of it proper, is over here. You can see the sort of period lighting. We're trying to, capture as much of that with the project as for consistency. And then the visitor building itself, just an illustration of what that would look like in 3D. This is the existing crosswalk. Essentially, the new pedestrian way will be in here. We're still working out, some of the details there, but you'll see that this building is shifting a little bit further over to where this seating now is, and that seating will essentially shift to the other side of the building. And so you'll see there are tree plantings and so forth. So you'll see some of that front building facade, but you won't necessarily see all of the detail of the building there. The other rendering that we have is from the other angle, facing the other direction on Merrimack Street. So now Market Square is back here, and the river is beyond your tree, tree line view here. That's the river. Waterfront West, way off to the side on the side here. And so what you'll see is, even though this building on this rendering is shown a little bit closer to Summerbees Way, which is the pedestrian path we have today here, and close to Merrimack Street, it will be shifted further over this way. Same building design really, but shifted further over, and that plaza seating would essentially be on this side now with the feedback we've gotten from the city council. So while the architecture isn't necessarily changing, the expectation of the building footprint would be shifted a little closer to Market Square, more proximate to the existing trailer and visitor booth.
Andy, is pardon the interruption, is that a sort of a handicap ramp to the left, right behind the guy in front who's sort of squatting? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. And we actually, even as recently as this morning in a meeting with Sasaki, we were talking about the pros and cons of various different orientations for those things. So we're trying to make sure as much access as possible, while also balancing out things like sea level rise, building first floor elevation, and cost for construction and grading and retaining walls and so forth.
Right.
And it's a balancing act, of course, between all these different considerations. And, we hear concerns from the council relative to project costs, but we also hear concerns about accessibility. And so we have to balance those things out. And so I don't know that the exact orientation, this will be adjusted, of course, those ramp locations and stair locations, because the building is shifting, but there will be ramps and staircases in so much as they provide access.
Okay. So, long story short, it'll be accessible, but the details are kind of to be determined.
Correct. Primarily in terms of the site layout or improvements around the building, but they will largely be substantively the same improvements you've been seeing on these renderings thus far. Yep. I don't know if there's Dan and Maren. Is there anything else that you think is that folks should see here before we look for feedback from the commission?
No, I don't think we don't have any other images to show. But...
Okay. So Chair Richards, I guess, and members of the commission, we turn it over to you if you have any feedback for us. We're hopeful that what we've been working on thus far and the direction we've been given from the council is not inconsistent maybe with what you would be looking for, because it is sometimes difficult to satisfy various different conflicting opinions. But we're hopeful that this is satisfactory and that the planning board, can take that feedback into account as they look at the site plan approval and DOD permit sometime in August.
Okay, well, we'll go around the board, but one quick question, Andy, before I do that. Especially since there's some subject to change things here. I'm wondering why we're looking at this now rather than waiting. Does the planning board or does the city need this report sooner rather than later for some reason?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's a good question. Long story short, there are a lot of, as Maren knows, as project manager for Sasaki here, there's a lot of moving pieces here, and trying to juggle them simultaneously is difficult for a project like this. It's a very difficult area of the city to be doing a project in because of all the complexities and overlapping interests and considerations. We're trying to balance a bunch of different things. One of which is the expectation, and that I should note the city council voted on Monday night to appropriate funds for the park construction, the primary park areas, like I mentioned in phase one, parking and the visitor building possibly being delayed a bit for construction. So this wouldn't necessarily happen, starting next year. It might be the year after, if we're lucky with funding. But part of what we're trying to do here is to keep juggling all these balls and keeping them moving forward to have shovel-ready plans this coming fall. Working out the inputs and the consensus we need both from the council and their acceptance of the plans, which is required here. And that's been, a slightly moving target for some features like this, as well as the planning board's approval, site plan approval, and DOD special permit. The historical commission obviously being comfortable with the building that's being proposed, the various licenses that are needed, the Chapter 91 license because of the public access on the waterfront. There are various stormwater management plans that go with the site improvements. And in order to coordinate all this together and actually get to a point where these things are ready to go, we have to juggle the various inputs and the various volunteer boards and their inputs to make sure that there's nothing out of sync. And, as the Sasaki folks know, we've actually moved around this building a couple of times in these plans following the direction we've gotten from the council. So because of the types of changes that can happen as a result of that feedback, we're hopeful that there won't be any drastic changes here in terms of the feedback we're getting, but that can make it difficult. If there are drastic changes, it can make it difficult for us to reach that final point where the plans are ready for bid.
Yeah. Okay.
And so for that purpose, to your point, because we've filed for the DOD special permit, and we were expecting the planning board to review that, I think on August 17th right now. We wanted to get the historical commission feedback. The feedback from the council that resulted in the building footprint change really came after we had initiated that process for the planning board filing. So we are now adjusting the plan accordingly, but we didn't necessarily want to slow down the permitting review process because we have to keep that in the fold to make sure that the resulting plans are all in sync together. And with the various different reviews, that could be very difficult to do if we push out the historic commission review.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Andy. Very thorough answer to my question. All right. Why don't I do this? What I typically do is, although there's nothing for the board to quote unquote vote on, I do want to get everyone's opinion so that I can incorporate those into the report. I look over and I see there are 0 attendees, so I don't see much point in opening a public comment period. So I think we'll skip that. So I'll go right to my board. I'll take them in reverse alphabetical order for now. And that means, Mr. Morgan, you're first up to offer your sage commentary, opinions, thoughts, anything at all.
No, I have nothing.
You got nothing, huh? Okay, that's fine. Let's see how about Chris Fay?
No, I don't see any issues with it. If the city council doesn't want it to be brick, then so be it. So, no, I think it looks nice.
Okay.
Be a welcome improvement.
Well, certainly an improvement over the trailers, huh?
Yeah, so I don't have any questions, no.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That's fine. Mark Sandrone, how about you?
I am stunned by the lack of imaginations given the historical and architectural heritage of our city. I understand its functional aspect. I understand that there are probably some cost issues involved, but I think it's the most boring piece of architecture I've seen in a long time.
Okay.
All right, I apologize. Keep in mind that Sasaki has worked with various different alternatives, but is also trying to be responsive to the council's preference as far as the building orientation and exterior treatment, so to speak. So that narrowed a bit of maybe what our options were in coming to you with a set of plans.
Okay, yeah. Don't take it hopefully the architects haven't taken it personally, but I will want to hear a comment from them when we're all done. Malcolm, can we get you on audio here if you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, originally I was attracted to the city when I came here 46 years ago, because it's an 18th century English seaport trapped in time. And this building looks like it's West Palm. And so I realized that there are specific things we're trying to accomplish, but I would like to see this building augment the feel of downtown rather than detract.
Okay. I'm just making notes here. If you'll pardon me just a second. Yeah, this is. Well, I'll save my comments for after Andrew has a chance. Andrew, would you like to add anything to what's been said?
Yeah, I guess I have the same feelings. I mean, my initial feeling was that it belongs on a golf course and it has very little connection to the town. in such a, a highly visible, every visitor is going to be there. Even the sign visitor center kind of reminds me of the New Jersey Turnpike. I don't think, I just don't think there's a connection to Newburyport.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my view is that, I've heard both sides of what I see as the kind of the design conflict here, if you will. On the one hand, in fact, it's almost forbidden by the standards to apishly try to imitate a 17th or 18th century, let's say an 18th century or early 19th century federal period building, whatever. So we want that. We want contemporary architecture is encouraged, I think, is the verbiage in either in the ordinance or the Secretary of Standards. But at the same time, it's supposed to be compatible, which is a tricky one. And I can certainly, I don't envy your position, but that way, speaking now to Maren and the gentleman there, what's your name? Dan, that, I don't envy your position of that kind of being on the hot seat, trying to exercise your architectural imagination and so forth, and dealing with, the city council and other interests and practical concerns about flood zones and all that. And I'm sure there's, as Andy, to use his expression, a lot of balls, juggling a lot of balls, even just with the visitor center, not to even mention the other aspects of the park. So yeah, I was, I'm not sure what else to say other than it. Part of me says it's almost a positive thing that it sticks out like a sore thumb in the sense that it's clearly not a historic structure. We've certainly accomplished that. As far as, I think it's whether one likes it, finds the design rather pedestrian or boring or however you want to think of it. I imagine any change at this point, it might make, for each person it makes happier, or might disappoint someone else. I don't know. That's typically what tends to happen at this point. So Dan or Maren, I'd love to hear if you have any comments to make, having heard those thoughts.
Sure, I'll try to fill in. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate hearing them. And I'd be welcome to have a longer conversation if you want, but and I don't need to give you a lesson in historic architecture, but I'll just give you a little bit of the background of some of the influences in making this small building that would not detract from the historic character of Newburyport and Market Square. It really originated with sort of the unpretentious nature of sort of early colonial and federal style architecture, which is prominent in this part of the state, and particularly to Newburyport. Kind of with its rhythm of openings, lack of sort of ornamentation, and the federal style really de-emphasizes the roof line, which sort of worked. That notion sort of worked in our favor here because the orientation of the building and the desire for net zero energy calls for solar panels on the roof. And if there was a gabled roof on it, you would see the solar panels, but the linear length of this building has given us the opportunity to de-emphasize the roof form and to sink the solar panels down into a well space so you don't see them. And then another thing that we're also sort of interested in, and again, the direction of the ways towards the water oriented these long wharf buildings in a very linear fashion. And so there's some notion to that sort of that extended length of building that's parallel to the way. And not trying to get into industrial architecture, but again, there's kind of a simplicity to it. It's part of when we started looking at this as a brick building, I think there was some concern that it would be too prominent of a building in a historic fabric. And I may have that slightly wrong, but my understanding from the committee, the ad hoc committee, was that they were worried that a brick building may be too prominent, and to to go to clapboard siding was something that would help sort of maybe minimize its impact. It became, instead of being instead of being a folly in the park, it's kind of meant to be sort of a quiet building in the park.
Yeah, I would echo what Dan just said. Dan, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to interject.
ahead,
I just
Andrew.
pulled up one of Dan and Sasaki's earlier renderings of the building that was considered at that time a different orientation, parallel to Merrimack Street, with a brick facade. And that were variations that were discussed off of this, but that was not necessarily something that the city council was interested in for the reasons that Dan had outlined. And I think the thought there was perhaps not necessarily trying to mimic the historic buildings perfectly, but rather to, like Dan said, sort of minimize it as a accessory structure to the park, and perhaps distinguish it as its own feature, and then and to kind of have it disappear as far as its perpendicular nature to the view shed, to kind of to sort of disappear, so to speak, if you will. And it's a relatively short structure.
And one other thing about the clapboard siding is the renderings show them as kind of a tannish yellow. That's maybe that's the material when it's first put on, but it's really intended to gray out, similar to what we say in Nantucket or the existing what is the name of the building? The Harbor Master building.
Right. So that's like an untreated cedar type situation.
Yes, that's right.
I see.
That's where we're looking right now. I mean, we could always go to the stain or.
Well, if it's any consolation, I like it better than this one.
that was before my time.
Yeah. Yeah, this one can't seem to make up its mind what it wants to do with its roof, and among other things. Anyway, all right. Yeah, and yeah, interesting.
Sorry, if I could, Chair Richards, the members of the commission, you'll have whatever opinion you have. Part of the difficulty with a project like this is there are so many different opinions.
Yeah. I hear you.
As I tried to note at the beginning, part of it's the difficulty of being sort of bounced back and forth, for Sasaki's designers being bounced back and forth between different expectations. And it's not 100% clear until the end, exactly where that falls, but trying not to be batted around so much that we can't reach an outcome that satisfies quote unquote everybody, or at least enough of a consensus. So
yeah, there's the only
I do have a question regarding hiding the solar panels. Well, I understand that there are some issues aesthetically speaking. I think solar panels are going to be part of our future regardless, whether we hide them or not. And I don't know why one has to make a special effort to hide them in an architectural manner. I think if they're going to be up on the roof or whatever, they're going to be up on the roof. Again, we're going to see more and more houses with solar panels. So an attempt to hide them to me seems to be a little futile.
Dan, are there any mechanicals being hidden up there as well, or is it just the solar?
There's energy recovery unit, or I'm sorry, a condenser for the air conditioning, heating and air conditioning, the energy recovery system. It's not shown in any of these views, but it's
sure.
And I do hear you. I'm not afraid to see solar panels typically, but there was a desire to, I think, minimize some of that kind of some of those functional elements from the committee. So,
all right, I'll just make one last quick comment. You can take it for what it's worth, and this rendering really shows it well. There's something about that stepped roof line at the corners there that just strikes me as odd. Maybe it's because the upper level of it is not coplanar with the walls below. It's stepped in a little bit, or it's something about it just seems, I don't know. I'm not an architect, so I can't give you this illusion. It just has this kind of odd layered look, top hat look that just seems odd to me. Just my personal opinion, but that's not why we're here. All right. Any last comments from my fellow commissioners that I should include in this, what I'm sure will be an interesting report?
Glenn, I would just, this is Chris, I would just maybe add one thing. It's not, no matter what what it looks like, it's not going to look like the rest of Market Square. It's not
Right.
going to have that look to it.
Right.
And it is a city that's, 300 whatever years old, and it's always changing. We as much as I think we would like to live in a seaport of the old days, we don't. So, if this is the desire of the city council, as I said before, but it's not Colonial Williamsburg either at the same time,
Yeah.
So we don't live in a museum. We live in a city with cars and visitors and
Yep.
boats and everything like that. So
Yep.
that's all I would add.
Yep. I agree, Chris. And that was part of what I was trying to capture with that balancing act between, trying to do something that really what it boils down to, we've run into this before, is it going to really damage in some way the locale? So you have to think about that. And, but, you're right, especially in something like this, given the size, the function of it and all that, a contemporary design is actually what is usually recommended or suggested. Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Glenn, I wanted to echo
you're
also
cheating,
your last
Andy.
point by
You're
just
trying
pointing
to,
out what we have today.
yeah, I know. You're just trying to influence to say, hey, Kimmy, you think that's bad? Check this out. Okay.
Just a little bit of humor there. So.
Yeah, we're on to you, Andy. All right. I kid, of course. All right. Thanks. Thank you very much, Andy and Dan and Maren, I believe it was. I appreciate your coming in and talking with us. And I'll try to, you said it's August 17th, the planning board is going to be reviewing this, Andy, is that right?
That's correct. I appreciate your time tonight, and I can appreciate how difficult it can be to reach consensus or come to something that is satisfactory. And we had varied opinions ourselves, and we were trying to be responsive, of course, to the feedback we got from the council to date on this.
Yeah, I know, and yeah, it is what it is. All right, well, thank you, Andy. You should be able to get that to them in time for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. It's a light agenda tonight, so let's move right along. Maybe we can have early night of it. There was a letter and under correspondence from Ann Joyce. Caitlin, I took a look. Looks like her house is now, in fact, in Newburyport, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So this board doesn't really have to do anything. Caitlin, maybe you and I can take a look at that and talk to her. And I have, well, put it this way, hopefully you've seen that letter. Basically, she just wants to have, her house listed as contributing, which to me, I mean, it's almost kind of a no-brainer. It certainly looks like it is. So we can perhaps get, that process underway. I don't think it's all that complicated to have that property added to our district data sheets as a contributing structure to give it some measure of protection from demolition and so on. I'll do a quick check though among my fellow panelists here. Does anyone have any objection to seeing if we can get that house listed? Going once, going twice.
Nope.
Nuts. Yep.
Nope.
Nuts. Yep.
Nope. Nope.
Wait a minute. That sounded like Chris answering for everybody. All right.
No objections. No objections.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. All right. So that's that correspondence. Oh, is Andy? Yeah, I see. Andy, you're still here. I did want you to briefly, if you can, address the in-person meeting changes, if we know what's happening with that. I think the members of the board would be interested in an update on that, if possible.
Yeah, sure. Great question. So there may be a change in the very, very near future, meaning today, tomorrow, I don't know. When I last checked, it hadn't switched over just yet, but the House and Senate have been trying to move ahead with basically extensions of the options to do remote meetings. The House, I think there's a House bill that had also called for by April next year a requirement that hybrid or remote access be provided to public meetings, which would be sort of a new thing implementing since the pandemic, the expectation that folks can access public meetings from home. Mm-hmm. At any rate, we're not sure exactly where that will go, but as of right now, we still understand that tomorrow would be the end date for having remote meetings, so to speak. So our expectation right now is that the Historic Commission on a go-forward basis is coming back in person. We're working to confirm meeting room locations and setups and so forth. Our thought, I think, is that the Historical Commission would follow similar to what the Planning Board and ZBA have done, as a permitting board, would follow the sort of format we've been using. We're still trying to work out what works best in terms of room bookings and space, because there's competition for meeting space and equipment that's needed, for hybrid setups and so forth. I'm happy to elaborate, but the long story short is we're expecting you to be back in person again, probably for your next meeting, but with the remote access still provided with what we're calling OWL cameras. That's the equipment we use in the public meeting room to keep the Zoom set up for everybody at home. So we have equipment in the room that will function as a single camera in the room, capturing what's happening. The visual is still on the screen. However, there's an expectation, barring new guidance from the legislature, options from the governor and the legislature, that you would be back in person with a quorum in the room. You could still have, a member, perhaps outside the room, remotely, but you'd have to have a quorum in the room per the normal open meeting law requirements that we were experiencing before the pandemic. So we'll keep you updated, to the extent things are changing. Caitlin and I will be coordinating with you and letting you know whether or not, you're essentially meeting at the senior center, whether you're meeting in the downstairs room there or the boardroom upstairs. We have been talking about other meeting rooms, whether it be City Hall, the police station, or library, but we haven't worked out details for that just yet. So we're trying to stick with what we do know is maybe available and works. And that we're currently right now, it's our understanding we should be meeting with our boards at the senior center. So we're trying to make sure that we're using the function room down there, downstairs, or the upstairs boardroom. And like I said, with a hybrid setup, so you're physically in person, but applicants, certainly the general public, might be able to access from home and still do their public comment that way.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andy. So I'm going to assume that unless we hear otherwise, we can expect to find out for our next meeting, which is the 23rd of July. No, sorry, which is the 28th of July. Sorry. That it'll probably be in person, and we'll play location to be determined.
Correct. And I think Caitlin and I would be touching base probably with Diane on Monday,
Yep.
Because given tomorrow and given where
Yep.
the legislature is, we might have a better update on Monday or
Yep.
Tuesday for you as to what's happening.
Yeah, maybe they'll do some last minute
Right.
legislation. All right. Thank you, Andy. Very good. Very good. One other quick note from the chair. We have gotten word of a person by the name of Jean Costello, or Costello, depending on how you want to pronounce it, down in Merrimack Street. I think her property was before this board a while back, but anyway, she's expressed possible interest in joining the group. So I just found out about this literally like either yesterday or today. So we'll be following up with her. Does anyone know Jean Costello? No? Okay. So we'll see what happens with that. We have minutes to approve from the 23rd of June. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that motion.
All right, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Seconded?
I seconded Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Okay, Mr. Bernhardt, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, Malcolm, I'm going to skip you because I believe I have you down as absent last week. Mark Cindrone?
Yes.
Okay. Chris Fay?
Yes.
Okay. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay. And the chair also assents to the approval of those minutes. Very good. I think, I probably shouldn't go back to a piece of business that we pretty much already discussed. Let me think, to our next meeting, I'm just thinking about this report. Our next meeting is the 28th. Would you all like to have a chance to review the draft report for the visitor facility? Because what I'm thinking is what I could do is try to get that done over the next 2 weeks and post it to or send it to you guys so you can at our next meeting, you can suggest any modifications that you'd like to see. Would you guys like the opportunity to do that? Anyone?
That sounds good. Could you repeat again the date for the next meeting? Please?
July 28th.
28th. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Thursday.
Chair and members of the commission, I defer to you, of course, but one thing, just by comparison, one thing that because the planning board provides recommendations to the council on
Right.
zoning changes.
Right.
When they were dealing with a recent change or discussion of a change on short-term rental units, one of the things that they had done, because they have 9 members and they all had varied opinions on that particular area, they had sort of primary comments and then they had sort of dissenting opinions. So you might even have a report that has varied opinions that are called out as opposed to something that's 100% agreement.
Sure.
That's what the planning board had done because of the varied opinions and comments. It was an attempt to sort of convey the thoughts in general without necessarily sort of giving sort of a reference point to the fact that there might have been varied opinions. So
That's a good idea, Andy. Thank you for letting me know about that. That might be a good way of accommodating some of the other opinions. Make a note of that. Okay, I believe the only thing left is to move to adjourn and vote on that. Is there such a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Andrew, motion
Move
to
that we
adjourn.
adjourn.
Okay, I heard Mark. All right, don't all jump at once. I heard Mark make it first, and then Andrew. I'll consider yours the second, Andrew.
Okay. Chris was
so-
in there too.
Yep. Everyone's dying to go, I guess. Okay, Andrew, your vote.
Yes.
Not surprising. Malcolm Carnwath, are you?
I'm in agreement.
You're in agreement. All right. Mark Syndrome.
Yes, have a nice
Okay.
weekend, everybody.
Okay. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Okay. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
That chair makes it unanimous. We are adjourned for this evening's meeting. Thank you very much for your frank and candid opinions, and I'll see what I can do with that report. So have a good evening, everybody.
Thank
Feel
you.
better,
Chair.
Glenn.
Good night.
Good night,
Yeah.
everyone.
Who?
Good
What? Did someone say something about a chair?
And congrats, Glenn, by the way, on your anniversary.
Oh,
Yeah.
you heard that, huh? Thanks very much. Yeah. Would you believe? Let's say, I think it's 40. Yeah, 41 years.
That's impressive.
Yep. I wanted to. I had this notion back in the day that in 1989 we tried to get to Paris because that would be the 200th anniversary of the storming of the Bastille on July 14th. So there'd be, I'm sure there'd be big bashes all over the place, and we could pretend it was all for us. But that didn't happen. All right, guys. Have a good evening, everybody.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.